Hi, and welcome to Spiritual Alchemy, the podcast with Julie. It's woo-woo for your boohoo. Tonight, I have Daniel Duke and Teresa Duke. No, they're not married. They're brother and sister. No, right?
Yes.
They're the great-grandchildren of Jesse James, and they're here to talk about their book, The Mysterious Life and Fake Death of Jesse James. And then we'll get into Daniel's book later on, Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasure, which is really cool. So thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm so happy to be on here.
It's going to be a ride. Let's get in the car and go. So let's start with your mother, your late mother, Betty Dorset Duke. She wrote a couple books, The Truth About Jesse James and The Smoking Gun. Now, how did she get into writing those books?
Well, she heard the story all her life. The story of Jesse faking his death and moving to Texas had been passed down through the family. Each generation had heard it, and she grew up hearing that story. And, when you hear that version and then you go to school or watch a popular movie, the histories were completely different. And she wanted to find out which story was true, history or the family version. And that's what that led to a whole lot of rabbit holes.
She basically heard it her entire life. Her grandmother was the daughter of James L. Courtney, aka Jesse James, aka James L. Courtney. So she got it direct down the line from his daughter, and it just carried on and went from there to do the research so she could, she always heard it, but she wanted to actually find the proof to, actually prove it. So that's what led down this crazy journey.
So you guys have taken over the wheel and continued to do more research. Is that correct?
That's right.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We had helped her for the last couple of decades, more than 2 decades. And then when she passed away in 2015, Teresa and I both vowed to pick up where she, finished the story and pick up where she left off. So,
you guys saw her doing all the research and everything she went through and trying to prove the truth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you guys have a different version of who the real Jesse James was.
That's right.
Oh yeah, definitely. The history states, that he was shot and killed in 1882. But we believe it was his cousin who was killed, and it allowed him to live on to be a very old, like what, Danny, 94, 95?
97 years old when he died.
Oh, 90, yeah. And then live out the rest of his life in Texas.
But yeah, he had, the traditional history claims that Jesse James was shot in the back of the head by Bob and Charlie Ford in 1882. And, from then, that was all she wrote. And in reality, he faked his death. And what a lot of people don't realize, and it's verified, everybody agrees, both sides, he had tried to fake his death once before in 1879. And it was in Oklahoma at the time they called it Indian Territory. And one of his fellow gang members, George Shepard, rode into town, said he was there to collect the reward. He just killed Jesse James, shot him in the back of the head. And the sheriff sent a posse out to look for the body. They never found the body, so that George never got his reward, and nobody believed that Jesse had actually been killed. And then we don't think he planned it out in 1882, but his cousin Wood Height, there was a weird love triangle between Wood Height, who bore a strong resemblance to Jesse, and Wood Height And Bob and Charlie Ford's sister, her name was Martha Bolton, and she had a cabin in Missouri. Woodhite was allegedly married. We believe he was married to Z Mills, Jesse's other first cousin. And she was also supposedly had an affair with her farmhand, a man named Jim Gibson. So there's this little love triangle. It blew up into a gunfight. Woodhite got killed. We believe Jim Gibson got killed, and he disappears from history, the farmhand. From that moment on, there's no mention of him. You can't find a grave, anything. And then you can't find a grave of Woodhite. Even our detractors, we've challenged them to show it. Where's Woodhite buried? They can't find his grave because from all the information we've found, he was buried as Jesse. I think Jesse got word of it, and his gang members, they knew Jesse wanted to fake his death and get out of it. And that was a perfect opportunity. So
in your book, well, Jesse James went to his own funeral, and you show pictures in your book.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Teresa found that. That was a big find. So
well, there were always rumors. There were rumors that he attended his own funeral, and it was always just rumors. So I was like, if I could find that picture, that would just be the best thing. So I just searched and searched and searched, and it's like it finally came to me, and I couldn't wait to tell Danny. I was so excited. I was like, Danny, I was like, look what I found. Yeah. So it was really cool to actually find it. You know, I think that's, you get to the point where you're like looking and then you just kind of get exhausted. And then when you finally find that little nugget that keeps you pushing you for, it just keeps you going. And I think that's just the little thing I needed, because it was after our mom passed away, and I was just kind of dragging, and I finally found it, and I was like, okay, yes, this is the sign to keep going.
She probably helped you find it too.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking she did. I had a weird feeling that day that I just felt like something was urging me on all day, like just a feeling that was nudging me, and I kind of have that feeling as well.
That's cool. I got the chills.
We do that too.
What was I going to ask? Like, is it known that Jesse James was a Freemason?
No, that came later. We didn't even know that. That wasn't really passed down through the family until we didn't really know until an elderly gentleman. His name was George Roming. He was a World War II vet, old guy, and he had seen one of our mother's articles in Texas Monthly Magazine. So he contacted Mom and wanted to tell her everything he knew, including part of about a treasure that he was hired by Jesse to help bury. So, we were all ears, and he told us everything he knew. And George was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. And he told us all about Jesse being a Mason. And so, we'd met after George, we'd met a couple of other Freemasons, and they all knew it, in that area, that part of Texas. Most of those guys were members of the same lodge Jesse was a member of. And it was pretty cool. And at the time, I didn't really put two and two together. I thought, okay, he was a Freemason. I didn't know that much about him. And later on, as things progressed and I started researching more into the treasure, I found out how important it was.
Right, exactly. Looking at your book, whoa, boy. I don't know what that meant. So what else, he's a Freemason. What else doesn't the public know that went into your book?
Oh, God. You want to
Blood,
go first?
sweat, and tears. Blood, sweat, and tears. I'll just leave it at that. No. But just, A lot of research went into it, but just a lot of background people coming out of the woodwork and kind of dropping hints to us as well.
Well,
So
like
basically,
history. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to step on your toes.
no, you didn't. Hey,
All right.
sure, he does.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
Uh,
Big brother.
Yeah.
I love it.
The good thing is, Julianne, we still talk after this. Like, I was so
Yeah.
afraid when we went on this project to write this book together. I was like, oh God, we're gonna probably disown each other after the book, but we're not. We're still talking. So that's a good
great.
thing.
That's awesome.
But yeah, to answer your question on the there's a lot that most people that the public doesn't know about Jesse, but most of the story, his whole story up until the alleged assassination in 1882 is pretty much correct. There's some embellishments by some people, some historians from the past, but overall, the traditional story is correct up until the alleged assassination. After that, most people don't realize that he didn't want to be an outlaw. He was kind of forced into it. It was either leave the country or stay and get hunted like a dog. And, because he rode with Quantrell's guerrillas during the Civil War, and they weren't granted amnesty after the Civil War ended. So they were either executed. They were either executed. Well, basically executed. They would either shoot them on sight or take them to a military, one of the forts back then, and give them a quick trial and hang them. Right. But so they didn't have a lot of choices, and he and a lot of the other guerrillas joined. They formed a gang and started robbing. And that's one thing. But when he faked his death and it was successful, but he had been in Texas before that. Then he faked his death. That made it a success, and he lived a peaceable life. It was almost like he changed from he was still in the he was involved in activities that we won't even maybe never know about. We've heard hints of things here and there, but there's no proof. And when it comes to secretive activities, it's kind of hard to dig up a lot of the proof on that kind of thing. So we can only go by the rumors, try to track them down, and most of them lead to dead ends. But some of them, like the treasures, for example, led into a huge web of history. And
say the least.
He was a peaceable man. People didn't mess with him. And most of the people around the Blevins, Texas area knew of him mostly because he was surrounded by a lot of guerrillas. A lot of the people in Blevins today are descended from Quantrell's guerrillas. And they're to this day, they're still, some of them like to talk, but a lot of them just keep quiet about it. It's almost like there's still an air of fear over that area. So
he was
interesting.
I think one thing I like to point out about him as well is, he's painted, Jesse James is painted as, this like hell bent on revenge, and, they were just ruthless. But we also saw a side where he was, had a family. He had like, how many kids, Danny? 7? I mean, he had a lot of, 7 kids. And there's one story that we were told from the family, some of the older relatives, that he was a churchgoer. He was a big churchgoer. It was a Baptist church in Texas. But he loved his music. There was that side of him. He liked dancing and he liked music. And at that time, the Baptists back then weren't into like letting people dance and listen to the music. Well, he had the record player, and he would play music for his kids, and everyone would just dance and have a good time and goofing off. And it got back to the church members, so they banned him from going to church because he was playing music. Well, he would stand outside every Sunday of the church to still hear, listen to the message, the sermons. And I don't know, for me, that meant a lot because he's painted as this ruthless, bloodthirsty outlaw, but he also, had a very tender heart and God-fearing person. And that story, it stuck out with me for some reason. So he had a tender side too.
And he became a farmer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
he was, like a beekeeper and farmer.
Oh, right.
when you go through his journal, he didn't seem to ever do that much work. He had the farm. A lot of times, later in life, he paid people to do it. And this is an interesting piece of trivia for most people, I would think. Later, it was sometime in the 1880s, I believe, he became a sheriff's deputy in the county he was living in Falls County, Texas. And I thought, wow, boy, that's odd. That's an odd story. But if you look at that time period, a lot of Texas Rangers who were known for, they upheld the law in Texas. A lot of Texas Rangers were former outlaws, and several of them were known to have gone back and forth from outlawry back to a Texas Ranger, just back and forth throughout their life. So it wasn't that wild, but knowing that who Jesse was, and he was one of the most wanted men in America, it just seemed shocking to me that he would have been a deputy. Yet it's the same thing that helped him fake his death. Nobody really knew what he looked like. So,
right.
And having the close knit group of friends and fellow Masons, I'm sure he had a nice security net.
Right. The Three Beards has a question up here. He wants to know if anything came from the number of letters in his new name change. The name change was 32 letters, and is there a tie to the Freemasons?
There could be. That's a good question. I'm not. I wish I knew for a fact, but it seems interesting. It's interesting to track that down and try to look for an answer. So
yeah,
I'm sure you're going to do it, though. I mean,
yeah, I'm going
to after this book. Come on.
Yeah.
So outside of this photograph you found, what were like some of your biggest revelations about, that you found in doing your research for this book?
You, Teresa? Which one?
Okay. The first one, or the mysterious life and fake death of Jesse James.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let Teresa start.
No, you can go first.
No,
I'm still thinking.
So, which were the biggest, like the aha moments? The biggest one, in my opinion, was Teresa's find of the photo of Jesse attending his own funeral. That to me is amazing. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better photo. And I remember there were rumors back in the day. People would talk about the tall stranger, a mysterious tall stranger who was at the funeral and nobody knew who he was. That we believe that's the answer to it. It was Jesse. So, and he's right there with his mother, Frank. I mean, he's right. You can tell. I mean, he wasn't just some bystander who wiggled his way up to the front. It was all family there.
And that photo is very clear. It's not grainy at all.
Yeah, it's a very.
It was a great picture.
It was like a godsend. I mean, Teresa found it, and it still blows my mind because our mother had talked about wishing we could have a photo, wishing there was a photo that would show the mysterious stranger they were talking about. And then unfortunately she passed away, but it was a year later, Teresa, when you found that?
Not even a year, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really wish I wish she could have seen it. So I think the thing that stands out for me is the things that didn't make it to the book, but just the little experiences that we experienced while researching. When you're researching, you save your information, your sources, have great things that you want to add to the book. You go back to find those sources to add that information. It was vanished. Those are the things I think. Yeah, those are the things that were the aha moments for me. Why were they gone? we had them saved, and it's like everything vanished, and it was so frustrating. But I don't know. That's the thing. Yeah, our sources are just gone.
Usually when a website disappears, you can go to the Wayback Machine. What is that? The internet search. It's like I can't remember the name of it. Internet search library or something like that. And they call it the Wayback Machine. And you can find records of websites from way back. And when every site that we'd used as a source that had vanished, there was no mention of it anywhere, even on the Wayback Machine. It was just, they were gone. And it just, that's the kind of thing that makes you wonder, why so many websites dealing with that topic and all of a sudden they're gone. So it was
we had it set, like when we got together to do the book, he was like, I'm going to do this half, you do this half. I'll cover this topic, you cover these topics. Yeah. And we had it all set in stone what we're going to do. And then when we went to look for those sources, we couldn't find them. And so last minute, we were like, oh, God, we have to come up with a game plan. What are we going to do? We were going to put those in our book, and now they weren't there. So those were the moments for me, the things that didn't make it in the book. A lot of frustration.
Well, one thing, and it's mentioned in his journal, he had mentioned, they all went to Louisiana, Jesse and the gang, and they went to Louisiana, and every place he had gone, there was a robbery within that week, and it was real obvious. They went on a robbing excursion, but one of the men that he mentioned in there, they stayed at a man's house on the Louisiana side of the river, and his name was Guthrie-Fontenot. And I thought, I thought that was an interesting name. And anybody he came into contact with, I always try to do a background, do their family tree, see who they're related to, find out anything I can. And this guy was the nephew of Jean Lafitte, the famous pirate. And I thought, how weird is that? Jesse James and Jean Lafitte's nephew, and Jesse was staying at Lafitte's nephew's house. It just seemed, and after all everything I'd stumbled on with the treasure research, it seemed like it was a lot more than just a coincidence. And also Jean Lafitte, just as a bit of trivia, Jean Lafitte was, I believe, it was pretty obvious he was a Freemason, because before Andrew Jackson had become president, he was a general. Jean Lafitte worked with him, it said and this is historic fact, it said Jean Lafitte had Masonic communications with Andrew Jackson. And I thought, well, that proves you can't have Masonic communications if you're not a Mason. So it added to the mystery and intrigue of the whole thing.
Wow.
And in my opinion, it hints at a larger network, an older and larger network.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, I got to bring this up, the Pinkerton attack.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the Pinkerton attack? That was interesting. So it's Jesse's mom that lost her, was it left arm?
Yeah, it was. We believe it was her left arm. She was in. Well, going back a little, there was a Pinkerton detective who claimed he was going to. He was even bragging. He was gonna be the one who busted Jesse and Frank James. So he stops at an inn that also had a restaurant. And he was telling the innkeeper about how he was going to take down Jesse and Frank James. And I guess he told him his plans. I'm not sure exactly what he told the innkeeper, but the innkeeper's last name was Courtney, and he was a former sheriff, and he was related to the Jameses. And Courtney was the alias that Jesse took after he faked his death. So the guy bragged to the wrong person, and they found his body the next day on the side of one of the roads on the way to Clay County. And so a Pinkerton was murdered, and I think the bombing seemed almost like retaliation for that. But they claimed they thought Jesse and Frank were in the house, and they threw a bomb in, and it was later proven at first they claimed we didn't know it was a bomb. It was just a Greek lantern and it exploded. It was an accident. Well, later there were records that dug up that proved it was a bomb and they bombed the house. But it killed Jesse and Frank's little brother. He was 9. Archie, it was their half brother, Archie Peyton Samuels. And it blew his half their mother's arm off, and their stepdad, Dr. Reuben Samuels, it maimed one of his hands, and he was already brain damaged to begin with from the Civil War. So he didn't have any luck at all. But
so that her losing her arm kind of helped you put together photos and your research. And,
it did. The same arm, same dress. We've got photos. Our photo, our family photo, matched to the down to the pattern of the dress that she was wearing. The historically accepted photo of Jesse's mother. So, and that was just one of many photos, but it helped a great deal. Same arm missing. They were wearing the same dress, looked identical, and we took it to mom. Mom sent it to 3 different forensic photographic. That one's a tongue twister for me. Photographic forensic labs, and they all verified that those were the same people. And it wasn't just they verified that Jesse was the same, his mother was the same, and several other family members. But let me see this real quick. I'm looking for the picture we've got. Yeah, like I don't know if you can see that very clear.
I think it needs to go up a little. Yeah.
Up a little bit. Oh, yeah.
A little bit more. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. And then the one with the dress, let me show you. I'll see if I can find that real quick. Sorry, I'm fumbling through here.
Is this in your printed book? Because I had the Kindle version.
Yeah, it's in a book. Well, some of these were just photos we had. We have a little booklet of. But I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, these are in the book, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's in the book. Go ahead.
It was fun. It was funny because when we first started doing the research, my mom was like, we need to find a picture of her to see if she doesn't have an arm. That's kind of like the ultimate proof. So we went to visit one of his granddaughters at the time who was still living. And she brought out the photo albums. And sure enough, we saw that picture. And she told us who she was, that it was James L. Courtney's mother. And sure enough, there was no arm. And we're like, oh, my God. I mean, it was such a surreal moment to find that picture.
And, we got to researching the real James L. Courtney and his mother. And they were both old ladies, but they didn't look, they obviously weren't the same people. So we thought, well, then why are they saying this is James L. Courtney's mother instead of the real Miss Courtney? And we finally figured, it seems when you look back at it, it's a blur, like a real quick blur, but it took many years of just, you would wonder and ponder and research and come to a brick wall, set that aside and hit another topic, trying to hit it from many angles. And eventually things just started falling into place like a puzzle.
That's awesome.
It was cool. And like the feeling Teresa had mentioned earlier, like you mentioned, you had chills. That feeling has come to all of us over the years. It's like you're researching, and out of the blue, you get this strange, driven feeling. And after a while, you come to find out when you get that feeling, you need to start looking because there's something you need to find. And eventually, it's like it just falls right into place. You could look for 10 years and not find it. But then all of a sudden, here comes that feeling. You go and you start researching, wondering what it's about, and it falls right in your lap.
Yeah.
It's a little odd, but you get used to it after a while. It's just, I miss that feeling. I haven't had it in about a year, so I'm looking for it again.
So you guys are still researching, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, constantly. It's just a never ending, just it's just a never-ending journey for us, I think.
Yeah.
It's just been so fascinating, this whole process, that it's like I don't want to stop with it. I just want to continue.
Well, and the
More,
people that he connected with a lot more people in his day and after.
oh yeah.
Look, Billy the Kid. My third book is going to highlight that. It's out in the spring or summer of 2022, but the third book deals more with his connections with groups and certain people, powerful people back in the day, up to politicians in our not too distant past. So that's all I'll say on that right now.
You don't want to give the book away.
Well, yeah, I don't want to do that. But it's not so much that. I'm just you don't want to make the wrong people mad. I didn't want to.
Lots of rabbit holes.
Okay, all right. Mum's a word on that. Okay. So your family had a lot of detractors and still does, obviously. So there's like this whole like drama over grave sites and exhumations and these multiple autopsies are done. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, there, when we first came out with it, Mom sent the photos to the photographic forensic labs. It was a Texas Department of Public Safety, which is our state police, the Austin Police Department, and their forensics lab, and then a group out of New Jersey. It was called Visionics, and then they got bought out by another company, I think Identics or something. But anyway, so she had those. They verified our photos match the historically accepted ones. We had the other proof, different journals and census records, birth and death certificates, all that. So we were all excited, and Mom was really excited. She thought that the people in Missouri at the James Farman Museum would be thrilled to hear that he actually didn't get killed by Bob and Charlie Ford. And that was a rude, we thought wrong on that. They didn't want to hear that. They didn't want to hear anything about it. So Mom thought, okay, I'll write a book and let the world know. So she wrote her book, and it came out, and that's when they started to attack then. Then she came out with her second book, and that's when the death threats started. She got death threats from different people who were associated with people at the museum in Missouri, and the FBI got involved. They put a stop to it. It took care of everything. And it kind of quieted down a lot after that. But then when our mother passed, they started making fun of her death. Some of them, not all of them. There was a couple of them that did. And I wish it was less than a week after she passed away. They had her obituary pasted on their website, drawing on it, making all kinds of just very childish and disgusting. And that made me mad. But I thought, just don't even. I kept hearing Mom's voice. Don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. That's the kind of thing that is meant as a distraction. And if you don't pay attention to it and keep about your work, your findings will be more painful to them than anything you could say on an internet forum. So, that's it.
So it was exhumed a few times.
Yeah. Sorry, I got
off track. That's okay. I'll keep you on track here.
Yeah, thank you. There was another guy named James Frank Dalton, and J. Frank Dalton, and he claimed before he died. And the funny thing is, he didn't claim this until after Jesse had died. James L. Courtney had died in 1943. Then Dalton came out after that and started claiming he was Jesse James. And the funny thing is, he knew quite a bit about the treasures. He didn't know. He made up a lot of stories. There's claims that he was a U.S. senator, that he was Jesse James posing as a U.S. senator in New York, living in a penthouse in New York while cornering the world's supply of copper, all kinds of just wild stories. And before he claimed to be Jesse James, he had claimed to be Kit Dalton. And it was just a lot of weird stories. But anyway, there's still a following that believes that J. Frank Dalton was Jesse James. And then when you show them proof that he wasn't, they claim there were two Jessies. And it just gets stranger, the deeper. So they had an exhumation in Granbury, Texas, and we went to that one. But I think the ones you're talking about, in 1995, the farm in Missouri, the James Farm in Missouri, and people associated with it exhumed. They got a plan together to exhume the body in the cemetery and prove once and for all with DNA that Jesse James died as history had stated. So, they got this Professor James Stars from George Washington University, and he headed the whole thing. He wasn't a forensic anthropologist. He had no background in forensics. He was a law professor, but they got him out there, and he claimed that they couldn't. People asked, why don't you just test his DNA against Zerelda, his mother's DNA? She's in the same cemetery. Well, he said Missouri law stated that you couldn't. That was just a bold lie. There was no law that stated you couldn't do that. So, but he danced around all the hard questions with just bogus claims. And it came down to the DNA. They claimed that they had proved it, that it was Jesse who was shot, and, history was correct. Well, we found out after digging for years, Mom and I met at the time, the man was the Clay County, Clay County Attorney General. No, district attorney for Clay County, something like that. I can't, for some reason, I'm not remembering his title. But anyway, his name was Stephen Caruso, and I believe he's still alive. He's an attorney. Mom and I drove up to Kansas City. We met him, talked to him. He said the hair, he was in possession of the hair that the museum had and the little Tupperware bowl with the teeth in it. And so, and that's a whole different part of the story. But the hair, they ordered him to hand over the hair. Court order said, hand over the hair. He wouldn't do it. He said the whole thing was like a shoddy 2-bit sideshow. And he wasn't, he didn't want anything to do with it. So he pulled the hair out of his friend's head and submitted that. The friend of his was John Hartman, who was the Clay County Parks director. He pulled John Hartman's hair out, submitted that as the hair that he was holding. They tested that, and they said, well, we couldn't get DNA out of the hair, but everything about it matches Jesse, on the documentaries and everything they did. And it's a huge joke. Stephen Caruso was laughing his head off while he was telling us this. And he said he never gave us details, but he said, I assure you, the teeth they tested had similar origins. And that's all he said. So the teeth they test, if he gave them fake hair, then I'm sure it sounds like he gave them a fake tooth as well. So all the testing they did amounted to nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just pretty much, and no pun intended, and I've said this before, but it shot their story full of holes. It's just
right.
They don't have a hat to hang, they don't have anything to hang their hat on. So it's mind boggling at all the lies and the twisted
there was
truth.
There was a lot of discrepancies.
Not only that, even if he did turn in the teeth that they claim they had, they kept in a Tupperware bowl, the teeth were dug up by an amateur. He was the curator of the museum, James Farman Museum, in 1978, I believe. He dug up the teeth, and he found a dog. It was dog's teeth, hog's teeth, a human tooth, and some other animal bones. And he put them all in this Tupperware bowl, and he would pass them out to his friends, and and then they put some back. Some people kept up some of the bones, and I thought that has just cross-contamination with DNA is one red flag that pops up right off the bat. And then prove that. How can you prove that was anybody's teeth, or it could have been anybody's? So it could have been one of the Pinkerton guys. So there's no proof. So. But the thing is, instead of going through all that trouble, there was a lady who at the time she was alive, as Sue Laura Hell was her name. And she was, everybody admits on our side, on their side, she was a direct descendant of Zerelda James. So they could have gotten her just a sample of blood from her. She lived in California. They didn't even approach her. Mom found out about her. and she asked if she could set up a way of her submitting her DNA. So her doctor drew her blood and submitted it with a strict chain of custody to a DNA doctor we use here in Texas, and he's got it in the bank. We've got her DNA. It showed a definite relationship with our mother when he tested mom's blood against hers, but he said if you want to stand up in court and cross all your T's and dot all your I's, you need to go up every step of your family, each generation, your mom's dad, and then his mother, and then Jesse, and test each one of them. And we were ready to do that, but half the family fought us in court over that. Said it was a violation of the sanctity of the grave. Yet they didn't have a problem. They were very proud that Jesse's father-in-law, Thomas Hudson Barron, who was a Texas Ranger, he was exhumed, and they were all behind that, and set 1976 and moved. His body was exhumed and moved to a grave next to the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum in Waco. So it's kind of odd that they were behind stopping us when they had no problem with the other guy. It's just a lot of weird stories in there.
Absolutely.
And I hope I made sense. This story
Yes,
it gets so long. There's a lot of little fingers that go off on the sides, and I always catch myself trying to go down all the rabbit holes and have to stop and pull it back in.
Well, let's talk about this rabbit hole now. Someone's asking, what is the story of the treasure? So tell us the story of the treasure.
Okay. Now, Jesse here in Texas had buried, everybody in the family knew he buried gold. They had a couple of, when he was an old man in the 30s and 40s, like my grandmother had told us stories about that. They'd have family get-togethers out at Jesse's house. And back then, no AC, in the summer or a hot spring day, they'd sit out in the yard, and a lady was fanning her hands on the dirt, and it uncovered the top of a mason jar, and she dug the mason jar out, and it was full of silver and gold coins. And everybody in the family knew he had, there were stories for decades of him burying gold and silver. And in fact, when he died, half of his children didn't go to the funeral. They stayed behind digging up the yard, looking for the gold and silver. So, and that's coincidentally, that's the same half of the family that was fighting the exhumation. It was just it. But back to the treasure stuff, he'd left a map behind that had passed down through the family to our mom. And we would look at the map, and it always puzzled us. There were no topographical marks, no like your classical treasure map. You'd think 40 paces from the old oak tree, X marks the spot. But it wasn't that way at all. It was just a geometric design, just a crosshatch line, some solid lines, and amount that he buried. And the amounts he buried, he wrote in code. And the code wasn't hard to break. It was just substitute letters for, numbers for letters. And he did it forwards and backwards with the alphabet. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was figuring out where it was, a starting point. So we went further, just as time went on. Former Attorney General for the state of Texas, Wagner Carr, he was also involved in the Warren Commission, which was, investigating the death of JFK. But Wagner Carr was very interested in Jesse and the gold, and he'd sent his driver out to show my mother and I where several large catches were recovered. And one of them was just 12 miles east of where I live now. And so she showed us these large catches, and she said they were so large, one of them took several 18-wheelers, several trips back and forth when they were recovering it. And according to her, the Texas Rangers oversaw the recovery of that, which was really interesting. I thought, well, I guess we're not going to find out what happened to it. But it went from that to George Roaming, the elderly gentleman I'd mentioned before. He had showed us another location. And so we had several locations to go by. And the location that George had showed us, he drew a map for us exactly where he remembered it as being, and said it was 680 bars of gold each weighing 15 pounds each weighing 15 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So we went out to look for it. It's on Fort Hood Military Reservation, so there's no getting that. I'm not going to hop their fence and go looking for it. So that'd be a death sentence. But but at least I had a location to go by, and it was an eyewitness account. One of the guys who'd helped bury it, he was 10 or 11 when Jesse was in his late 80s or early 90s, and George had, he swore that's where it was. I lined that up with the locations Wagner Carr had mentioned, and it fit this treasure template. And I'll show you the template.
Okay, you're better at. I'm not sure what I'm looking at on the internet here. It's like this is
a lot
of information.
I don't know if you can see it clear.
Yeah.
It's a rhomb.
I have the book here.
Yeah, well, it's the treasure template that came about. J. Frank Dalton, the guy who claims to have been Jesse and several other people in the past, he had, and that's a whole nother story, rabbit hole in itself. But he had claimed that that was the Knights of the Golden Circle treasure template, and the Knights of the Golden Circle were a pro-Southern group who during the Civil War they kind of acted as spies, and they worked to halt or slow the movements of Union troops by burning bridges and things like that. After the Civil War ended, they allegedly changed their goals to gaining as much wealth as they could any way they could to fund a second Civil War, which always reminds me of two rival football teams. The loser always wants another shot, and that sounds like what they were doing. Well, according to that part of the story, the Knights of the Golden Circle had this treasure template, which I'd just shown, and they claimed it was their template, and that, led to untold millions in gold or billions in gold. And it does lead to a lot of gold, but it's not the Knights of the Golden Circle. I had no reason to doubt it at first, but as I kept researching it, these treasures, I laid the template over the locations George and Wagner Carr's driver had shown us. So, and it matched the template perfectly, and it tied in with other sites I'd heard about. And I thought, I wonder how far this will go. So I started setting up templates next to the template, and it made a grid pattern. I got on Google Earth. I finally knew the dimensions, and that was the big problem. You have to know the dimensions for it to work. If you don't, you're like a fish out of water. So I finally got all that figured out, expanded the template on Google Earth, and it lined up with places like the Los Lunas Decalogue stone in New Mexico, which is a mysterious stone with Hebrew writings. When the pioneers had supposedly asked the natives who put that there, they didn't know, and some replied that it was people who came before them. Then I thought, well, okay, if this lines up with the Los Lunas Decalogue stones and other treasure sites like the Kensington Rune Stone that Scott Wolter's done so much work on, it lines up with that. It lines up with areas around Oak Island, the Newport Tower in Rhode Island, and other locations, which all predate the existence of the Knights of the Golden Circle. So in my view, that automatically it discounts the Knights of the Golden Circle being the ones behind making the template. I think maybe some of them may have known about it. I'm sure they could have easily, especially seeing how a lot of them had worked as spies during the Civil War. I'm sure they came across a lot of information that was news to them, and they probably took that as their own. They may have found out about it somehow. I'm starting to ramble now, but anyway, trying to keep myself on track. So I found out, it predated the KGC, and I thought, well, who predates the KGC? And it kept leading to more involvement with Freemasons, different Freemasons, like Jean Lafitte, for example, that I'd mentioned. His nephew let Jesse and them stay at his cabin overnight, and just different parts of it kept tying in with Freemasonry. And the thing that was a big key for me was when I was reading the book Foundations Unearthed by Marie Bauer Hall. She was the wife of 33rd degree Freemason Manly Palmer Hall. And she was talking about a treasure that she had discovered there were anagrams and ciphers, anagrams on tombstones in Williamsburg, Virginia, at the Bruton Parish Church, and ciphers in the works of Shakespeare that led her to that church. And I thought, this is wild, but it doesn't sound any more wild than the rabbit hole I'm caught in. So I kept reading, and everything she mentioned tied in with the research. It fit very well. It's like a big piece of the puzzle. And I thank her. She's been I wish I could have met her, but she unlocked a big part of that for me, and it led to more Freemasons, the involvement of Freemasonry. And I wanted to know. I got to where I didn't care so much about the treasure. I wanted to find out who was behind it, who was so intelligent that they came up with this amazing, the network, the meanings behind it, the different faiths and beliefs and well, like Kabbalistic symbols and meanings, gematria. And it wasn't just Jewish, it was Jewish Kabbalah, occult Kabbalah, and Christian Kabbalah all mixed together, and also other faiths. And also another person that helped was watching the documentaries and reading books by Timothy Hogan, who was the current Knights Templar Grand Master. That helped fit a lot of pieces together. But I feel like I'm rambling.
So
I want to thank the Academy.
You're ready for bed now, huh?
No.
Little nightcap. Oh, that's right. You don't sleep much.
No, I don't. I'll be up all night probably. But no, that led. I wanted to find out who started this. I also read Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, 33rd degree Mason, and he talked about a lot about Kabbalah, and I felt very strongly by that point that Kabbalah, I needed to learn more about Kabbalah and the symbols behind it, and I got deep into that, and I want, in search for who started this. I wanted to know who did this. And it finally led me, past the founding fathers to Francis Bacon. And I thought, okay, that's the same guy Marie Bauer Hall was talking about. And I wanted, I thought that he's the guy who did it. He's the guy who started this all. And by the way, I believe he and a group of his close associates were the authors of the Shakespeare works. I don't believe William Shakespeare was the true author, but that's another rabbit hole.
That's a different show altogether.
Yes, it is. And there's already been books and documentaries on that are very fascinating.
Oh yeah.
But I was satisfied for a couple of days, and there's something kept nagging at me, and I thought, who was Francis Bacon's mentor? John Dee, the famous alchemist. They call him the original 007 because one of the alchemical signs he used to sign off when he would sign his name on letters to the Queen looked like a 007. And so I thought, okay, if he could have easily come up with this, and it was almost like doing a family tree for an organization and associates of those people. So I kept researching everybody in their circles and going back, and it made a straight line to a lot of famous people, Jewish rabbis, through the Jewish rabbis, and most of those Jewish rabbis were all descended from this guy. It went all the way back to a rabbi named Rashi. They called him Rashi, and he was a favored court guest of the Templar founder, Hugh de Champagne, one of the founders of the Knights Templar. And that is when I thought, okay, it came from the Templar treasures, and it tied in with books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, of Da Vinci Code. A lot of people who haven't read that I'm sure most people know about the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
The Holy Blood, Holy Grail story, in my opinion, is I believe this treasure story is a continuation of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail story here in America. And I thought, okay, why did they do this? Why, back in those days, there were so many groups who were being persecuted by the Vatican. Said if you spoke out of line, you said the wrong thing, you could lose your head, your career, all sorts of horrible things. And it was a lot of groups who had a common enemy. And I believe the learned people in those groups formed, like the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons. I believe they formed these groups. They had a common goal, and they moved the treasures from France and other locations to the Americas. Not all of them, but a lot of them. I still think Rennes-le-Chateau in France and other areas in France probably have a lot of treasures and more discoveries to be found. But I think a large portion of the treasures were moved here. And for safekeeping. It was kind of out of the reach of the Vatican, or for a while anyway.
Someone says, and all of that started in Atlantis.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can go back that far.
Well, I don't know, but I've watched Simcha. I have a hard time pronouncing this man's name. It's Simcha Jakobovich or Jakobovici. The Naked Archaeologist is what they call him. That he had a very interesting documentary and on Atlantis. So that may be. It's just going deeper. I swear, I told my sister, I said, I need to take a vacation for about 6 months to a year and just clear my mind and get all the cobwebs out and then come back fresh. So.
Right? I can only imagine. I've done a genealogy before, and it's like you just constantly like, oh, well, I got to go check this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
then add some name changes in there. And it's
on the back of the book. At the very top in red on the back of the book is a glowing endorsement from the Knights Templar Grand Master Timothy Hogan. And that made my day. Everything I'd done when I saw that, I didn't know that was going to happen. And when I saw that he had endorsed it, that was just all I needed.
What an honor for you.
Oh, it was a great honor for me.
So basically the template and the map, you could probably put over the whole globe to find treasures throughout the whole world.
I'm not sure if it would line up exactly. It wouldn't shock me, but I haven't tried. When you get on Google Earth, it's because Google Earth is more like a collage of satellite photos instead of a real map. So when you try drawing the lines across it gets iffy in some areas. The further away you go, the weirder, the stranger it gets. And also the curvature of the earth throws it off. So I'm not a cartographer by any means, and I wish I could meet someone who knew what they were doing, and we could put the map together and see what it lines up with in Europe and elsewhere. Yeah.
Oh, you got to do that book.
That would be really cool.
We'll get on the horn and find some cartographers out there for you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This guy needs some help.
Yeah.
So do you have?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I get.
Throw it in there.
It was designs that the Templar had. I'd shown a couple of illustrations in the book, like on the Templar church in London. On their western door, there's an old ironworks that are in the same, not the exact shape of the template, but if you lay the template over it, it matches very nicely. And I think that's a template they've been using for centuries.
Is it this one?
That was in Hagia Sophia. Let me see real quick.
Okay. There's a lot of symbols in here. The fleur de lis here. It's really interesting. There's a lot of information here. I had to take a nap between chapters.
Yeah. I've been.
After you do the research, and you do feel like your mind is just overwhelmed at times.
I have an older friend, and he told me, he said, that damn book gives me headaches. It's too much math, too many symbols.
Oh boy.
I can't find the photo. I'm looking for it. That's driving me crazy. I had a book that was earmarked with everything, so I could do this real quick for you, and then I don't know where that's at. I've been rearranging everything, and I don't want to tear your book up looking for it, because this is the book I'm sending to you.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. Um,
I'll look for it while we talk.
so do you have a title for your next book?
No, not yet. The publisher, I always give my idea. For some reason, coming up with a title just kills me. I don't know why. I can't come up with a good title. I can write the book, but I can't title it. Or it doesn't sound that great. And the publisher usually comes up with a better title than me. So I'm hoping they'll do that with the third book too. But it deals with associates of Jesse's other well-known outlaws in the Old West. Billy the Kid, for example. A lot of people don't realize that Billy the Kid and Jesse had met in Las Vegas, New Mexico in July 1879, talking about possibly teaming up. And it was a lot that kind of stuff. I would love to have seen just the meeting. And there's stories of the meeting. There was a doctor who was a friend of Billy's, and he wrote a book about it years later. But it's very, and then there's there's a lot of stories that Billy the Kid had also faked his death, and basically killed in the same manner, shot in the back of the head by his friend and former gang member, Pat Garrett. So that's another example of a man going from outlawry to being a sheriff. It was just back and forth. But yeah, he had he was close with Billy the Kid, Johnny Ringo, and several other old West characters.
Oh, I'm looking forward to reading that one.
Yeah.
That's
and Johnny Ringo was actually one of his cousins.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
pretty weird. It gets real deep. I didn't want to go too much further than the 70s on a lot of that stuff. Just because I think it's healthy to stop at the 70s. So. Yeah.
I think the book should be titled just Rabbit Holes. Like we've gone through so many different. Yeah.
Well, that brings up another topic.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
that brings up another topic. Marie Bauer Hall, the wife of Manly Palmer Hall, she had mentioned that the vault she had located the foundations of the original church in Bruton Parish in Williamsburg, Virginia. A lot of the people, historian, all the experts back in the day said that's just completely wrong. And she proved them wrong by the ciphers she found in the works of Shakespeare and the anagrams on tombstones in that cemetery. It pointed out, and she cracked the code. She excavated it and proved that she was right. There was a church that predated the one that was there. So, and she went further and claimed it also mentioned and led to a vault 22 feet beneath the original church that held the contents. It was of wealth. It was things of wealth like gold, silver, jewelry, stuff like that. But she said more importantly, it had information that would shake the pillars of history. And that's all she said. And shortly after that, she wanted to excavate. She'd started excavating for the vault, and she was put to a stop. I believe they even put her in jail for the night and then basically told her to get out of town. So she never got to finish her excavations.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's another rabbit hole.
Yeah. But
it's just funny because when my mom first started this, she just wanted to prove that Jesse James didn't die, as history stated. And none of us realized just where all this would lead to. It's been just really insane.
Well, like the treasure map that was passed down through the family. Crazy. I thought at the most, you'd be lucky if at the most you found maybe a saddlebag of, with a few silver coins or something. And I would have been thrilled. And then I stumble across, all of that. And it was just one mind-blowing piece of information after another. And I thought, you have to question yourself when you find things like that. It's like I had to keep proving to myself that this was actually really happening because it goes so against what most people are brought up to think or believe. Like Jesse James, for example, traditional history claims that most of those old outlaws died poor and broke. Just broke and miserable lives, and they spent all their ill-gotten gains. And I guess sometimes I wonder, was that put out there just so that youth of America wouldn't look up to them and think, hey, I'm going to get rich like that too? But maybe it was a moral lesson, and that's why they passed that version of history down. But it's not true. Jesse was very comfortable, and all his friends were very comfortable. They were wealthy, and they weren't greedy or gaudy with it. They helped a lot of people. Like during the Great Depression, according to George Roming, during the Great Depression, Jesse and his old buddies helped keep the banks in that area afloat. And I thought, how weird is that? America's one of the most famous bank robbers in America helped the banks in the Great Depression in his area stay afloat. And I thought, well, he probably had investments in each of them, so it was
probably.
Yeah. But he kept the communities going. So I'm not condoning anything he did when he was an outlaw. He was no angel by any means, but he wasn't the psychopathic killer that some historians have tried to paint him out to be.
I have a viewer. I'm from Southwest Missouri, and I know where I'm from, the whole area of Missouri, Arkansas. Everyone is protective of Jesse James and always says he was a misunderstood hero.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah.
I'm biased,
Definitely.
but yeah. And not just Jesse, but a lot of the others too, the gang members and others.
Yeah. Huh.
I think there was when you get down to it, I think there was, and I've been told some things like that. There were, well, like I'd mentioned, the reason for bringing the treasures to America was trying to find freedom and liberty from the powers that be at the time, which was the Vatican. And they were, with all the inquisitions and all the other stuff they'd done to people, you can see why, well, like the Templar themselves. I had one man tell me, Freemasonry wouldn't have done that, outlaws and this and that. And I said, well, what about the Templar? That a lot of them became pirates, and Freemasons are more than happy to say, yeah, we come from the Templar. So, and I'm a Freemason. I'm happy with it. So,
wow.
I think it's one man's hero or one man's villain. One man's villain is another man's hero.
Absolutely.
Like Jean Lafitte, the famous pirate, for example, he was known as a pirate by the people he attacked, which was mostly Spanish, and because they were backed by the Vatican. But when it came to America, in America, Jean Lafitte was considered a privateer, and that was a legitimate business. So,
sorry, my dog's barking.
Oh, no problem.
I loved it. Sometimes I laugh because when I'm at work or on Zoom meetings and my cat starts meowing at the worst time, and it's a real loud meow, and I'm like, what are you doing? So I like it. It keeps it real.
I want to thank you both for coming on tonight. It's been an education.
Thanks for having us.
I loved it. Yeah.
So, I want to send
seriously, thank you.
I want to send our viewers and our listeners to Inner Traditions or Amazon to get your books, The Mysterious Life and Fake Death of Jesse James, and Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasure. Excuse me. And
thanks.
I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and good night, everyone.
Night.
Okay.
Yeah, good night.